Hey, this is Matt once again. What about in the video? This is the paid request this time from my dear friend Efree. I do hope he's doing better. He's a bit under the weather when I message him on email. So I do hope he's doing a bit better. But he sent in a paid request. And for those interested in requesting any type of videos, it could be a review, a re-review, a topic, reaction, commentary, randomness, out of blueness, whatever it may be, feel free to send it either directly to my PayPal or join my Patreon. Both links are down below in the info box. Pretty much under any of these videos. Now, the film today is Castle Falls. Now, Castle Falls is a film I had heard of. It's a film starring Scott Adkins and Dolph Lundgren. And Dolph Lundgren directs as well. And the story, long story short, is Scott Adkins was a former fighter who's at this gym. He thinks he still got it. Others say he doesn't. He wants to prove himself, but during the sparring session, he does lose. He taps out. Well, he doesn't really tap out. He pretty much gets passed out in a submission hold. So now he loses that place at the gym. He wants to find another job. He finds it as part of his crew of Demolition. Not the WWF band. A tag team. Although if Demolition was a band, it'd probably be some heavy metal hardcore stuff. But Demolition Team, I thought this was a bit on the nose. It was Lundgren Construction Services. I'm like, come on, Dolph, really? You named it? Because there's a sign in the back when Scott Adkins first gets to the job, and it's like, hey, I'm here for a job. And in the back, there's a sign that says Lundgren Construction Services. I'm like, dude, really? You named it after you, Dolph? Okay. But during this time where they have to take down this hospital called Castle Heights, he finds money in a wall. The money's about $3 million. Meanwhile, Dolph is a prison guard, and this prisoner who got in a... Someone tried to stab him. Well, they did stab him. They tried to kill him. He's in the infirmary. He tells Dolph, hey, I want some payback. I know your daughter is sick. She's got cancer. She needs surgery that costs like $400,000. I know where you can get some money. Plus, they'll piss off the bad guy that tried to get me killed. So then Dolph goes there to get the money for his daughter's surgery. Also, the bad guy who's in prison, he hears this is going on, so he sends his brother and his crew to the same place to go get the money. So you have Scott, who finds the money, you have Dolph, who wants to find the money, and then you have the bad guys. It's about a 6-man team, about 5 guys and a lady. Sounds like a fun gangbang, but... how do I put this? Castle Falls, at the end of the day, you know how you have it's okay and then mediocre meh? It's kind of in the middle of that. I did not love the film. I did not hate the film. There's a lot of better movies. There's a lot of worse movies. I would say it's an alright time waster. It's a decent diversion. You put in the background, you watch. It's pretty short. It's only an hour and 20-some minutes long. I like Scott Adkins. I like Dolph Lundgren. I even like a lot of the stuff Dolph's directed. Like The Defender, The Russian Specialist, Command Performance. This was... It's better than the last Scott Adkins film I saw, Max Cloud. It's better than some of the recent Dolph stuff, like Blackwater with Van Damme, or Legendary, which had Dolph and Scott Adkins in it, which was like this crappy-looking CG monster. But it's a bit disappointing because you got these two guys involved, because they're on the same side, going up against bad guys, because you got Dolph directing. I did expect a bit of a better movie. Now, I remember hearing that they were filming and then they had to shut down because of the pandemic. So that might have hurt things. Low budget definitely hurt it. Sorry about that. I know you love that. I love to clear my throat. Such a wonderful, annoying sound. I apologize for that. But, see, I don't know what to say. Is it an awful film? No. Should you see it if you're a Scott Adkins, Dolph Lundgren fan? Sure. Is it a film that you don't say is great and you love and is memorable and you don't remember? Not really. Is it a film I would get in my collection? Nah. Was it worth a watch? Yeah. Because let me go through the positives and negatives. The positives, Scott Adkins and Dolph do a decent job for what they have to do. Once or twice they show a little bit of emotion in a sequence or two. I wish they were together more to get a bit more maybe banter back and forth. I do like to set up the premise. It might not be the most original premise. It'll remind you a little bit of that film Trespass back to the day with Bill Paxton, Ice-T, Ice Cube. But I don't mind the setup. We have Dolph, Scott, and these bad guys in this place loaded up with dynamite, and it's going to blow up in like 90 minutes or so. And we got to get this taken care of. There's a couple decent fight scenes. Scott Adkins has about 3 or so decent little fight scenes. 3 or 4. The lady bad guy, the way she goes out was pretty funny and pretty interesting. I'll get to that when I get on the spoilers. It's pretty straightforward. There's not 85 subplots, and like I said, it doesn't overstay its welcome. Like I said, it's a pretty short film. But the negatives, number one, it takes too long to get going. By the time Scott Adkins gets the money, and then Dolph's getting in there, and the bad guys getting in there, we're like 42, 45 minutes in. And there's 40-some minutes left of the movie, and that involves the end credits. It takes way too long for it to get going. Like, we're halfway through the film, and Scott finally finds the money. It's a bit too long to get to that. I understand setup, but this is not Gone with the Wind. It's not The Shawshank Redemption. It's, just an action film. I don't think it needed this much of a setup. It's not like the most complicated story. Number two, it needed more action. Dolph barely does anything. I mean, I get it. He slowed down in age. You could see that in this. And I understand why Dolph did that. Yeah, give Scott a bit more. Understandable. And as it rains here. But Dolph doesn't really have much to do. I mean, he doesn't... The only little fight he gets in is him and Scott Adkins have a alright fight. But you tell Scott had to hold back because Dolph is slow with age. So that kind of lessened it a bit. But what did you do? People get old. Dolph has had surgery on his hips and so forth. What more can you do? It does show that Dolph, as much as I love the guy, he can't do as much physically as he could back in the day. That's just how it is. Old age catches up with everybody. I'm not knocking Dolph for that. That's not his fault. But you tell it's an alright fight, but you tell... Even compared to like Skin Trade, which I think is much better than this. I know my friend Efree will disagree. That's cool, teach their own. I think Skin Trade with Dolph Lundgren and Tony Jaa is much better than this. Because that one felt like it had more action. I thought it had more fights. It had better fights. It looked like a bigger production. They had a bit more money to be a bit more stylish. And I definitely think that's a bigger, better movie, Skin Trade, compared to this. Yeah, I know my friend Efree will think the opposite. We just agree to disagree. Nothing wrong with that. But like when Dolph was fighting Tony Jaa, that was a bit more of an exciting fight. Then you had Tony Jaa versus Michael Jai White and all this other stuff. Here, Dolph is trying, but you tell Scott has had to slow down a bit. But it did not a bad fight. But I said there's now, because there's only 6 villains, and of the 6 villains, 2 of them, like one gets blown up, and one, I don't want to spoil, yeah, what happens to the lady. I just wish it had more action. A lot more action. Whether it be fisticuffs, shootouts. If Dolph can't do the physicality, then maybe some punches, kicks, and some shooting. A bit more of that. The villains were meh. I can't remember much about the villains, to be perfectly honest. I'm actually having a hard time picturing them in my head. So I thought the villains were pretty run-of-the-mill. In one ear, out the other. The budget is a bit low. You tell, they got a place that is, of course, being deconstructed. There's an explosion at the end where the effects are a bit middling. So, not having the biggest budget. Maybe the pandemic really hurt them where they had to shut down and go back. They probably screwed things up quite a bit. And just, too much of a build-up. Of the first 45 minutes, there's one little action, and it's like a sparring session that Scott has with a guy for a minute or two. Well, about 2 or so minutes. I'm like, damn, this is I get set up, but this is taking quite a bit long. And then the payoff wasn't, and you did have a setup. Aliens. Granted, they had a much bigger budget, but that has a big setup. But also had a great payoff. You gotta really sell the payoff. I don't think the payoff was exceptionally worth it for all the setup it did. So, when I look at Scott Adkins, I would put Accident Man 1 and 2, and One Shot, and Avengement, and Undisputed 2, 3, and 4, and The Debt Collectors above this. But I would easily watch this over the first Debt Collector, over Max Cloud, over Assassination Games. Same with Dolph. It's nowhere near, with Dolph Lundgren's other directing work, it's not up to par with The Defender, which that's a Dolph Lundgren film where him and his team are protecting someone, and these insurgents come in. Jerry Springer is the president of the United States, and he actually wasn't that bad in it. And that was an interesting choice. I would put The Defender above this. I would put The Russian Specialist, which was sort of his revenge movie. Put that above. I would put Command Performance, which was Die Hard at a rock concert. Dying is easy. Rock and roll is hard. I would put that above this. It's not as bad as, say, Missionary Man, which Dolph directed. This for me is kind of, Like I said, it's better than when Dolph teamed bad with Van Damme in Blackwater, but I don't think it's as good as when he teamed up with Tony Johnston Trade. That's just my opinion. It's better than when Scott and Dolph teamed up in Legendary, and Dolph was the bad guy, Scott was the good guy. And Universal Day of Reckoning does have better action scenes. I just do not like the story. And that's why I hate the film, because I don't like what they did with Van Damme's character, Luke Devereaux. I thought it was disservice to the character. Turning him to Colonel Kurtz, whatever, from Apocalypse Now. I'm not a fan of that. I don't care for that direction. I would have just preferred leaving Van Damme out of it and just having... If you left Van Damme out of that and just have Dolph Lundgren come back and Scott Adkins faces against Dolph and the other Unisouls, I probably would have been fine with that movie, despite the epilepsy. Just don't have Van Damme in that movie. I think Day of Reckoning would have been much better. I think having Van Damme in that kind of fucked up the movie. Just that's what happened to Luke Devereaux. Anyway, I'm going off tangent. I'd rather watch this over that, because the story is fine to me. But like I said, it needed more action. It needed to pick up the pace a bit. And it needed a bit of a bigger budget. And the villains, again, meh. So. Not awful, but I really don't remember much about them. So, getting more into spoilers, Scott Adkins, like I say, he's in this gym in Atlanta. He's training. And the guy's like, you're past your prime. You're a sparring partner. You're not a killer. You don't have the killer instinct. Scott's like, well, you know what? I can fight any one of you guys there. In fact, I'll fight your top guy. He does, but he loses. So he's out of the job, out of the gym. Gotta find another place. He finds his new job with the Lundgren Construction Services to tear down Castle Heights Hospital. Like I said, Dolph is a prison guard. His daughter is sick. Needs $400,000. This inmate is almost stabbed. He is stabbed, but he's almost killed by this other guy in like this 20-second fight. Finally tells Dolph what's going on. Dolph goes there. Sometimes, like Scott Adkins at one point, we get this awkward flashback to what we saw at the beginning of the film. I'm like, dude, this just happened like 15 minutes or so before. We don't need a flashback to what we just saw 15 minutes before. Like, come on now. Scott becomes friends with this guy at the job. And again, he doesn't get the money until like 42, 45 minutes in. We're halfway through the film. And then his coworker gets killed. And it's weird. He doesn't say anything. He doesn't do anything. He's watching the whole thing. And you're like, hey, if you shoot him, your money's gone. Or if you shoot him, I drop your money. Or you shoot him this and that. He doesn't do any of that. He waits till the guy dies. And then he goes, no. I get it. He's reacting to seeing that. But number one, he met the guy a day or two ago. It's not like it's his best friend for 10 years. But I understand being horrified, but then it's like you don't say anything, and then you do that, then you give your position away. I get that it's a human reaction, of course, but it just felt a bit dumb as well. There could have been another way where they found where Scott Adkins was at. Again, just have it be like Scott Adkins goes, hey, okay, let him go. I'll give you the money, alright? And then they shoot the guy, and then they shoot at him. And then, like Scott tries to save him. But I would have preferred that more. And that's where you finally, almost 50 minutes in the film? This is the training, the little fight at the beginning was alright. But the true first decent fight scene for me is not to say the one at the beginning was bad, it's just I was indifferent on it. Here, finally a nice little fight. Camera's not too bad. There's a little bit of shaky, but not to the point I was having a headache. It wasn't cutting every 5 milliseconds. It was fairly holding on to Scott and the bad guy, going back and forth. Some nice moves, punching the guy, nice elbow to the nose, drop kicks the guy into an elevator shaft. That was cool. I'm like, okay, great. Now we're getting going. These two bad guys get him, and the lady's talking shit. He headbutts the lady, knocks the guys down, runs off. Meets Dolph. They have a bit of a fight. Again, you can tell Dolph has slowed down quite a bit with age, sadly. Just how it is. But it's an alright, fight. Then they have to run off. Again, by this point, we're about almost an hour into the movie. We only have like 20-some minutes left. And I went, damn, we only have like 20-some minutes left? It just doesn't feel like a whole lot has happened. And that's where the disappointment comes in. Compared to other Dolph or Scott Adkins movies. Maybe if you had like more bad guys or something like that would be nice. One moment that was enjoyable is the bad guy, the lady, I should say, the evil lady, I forget her name. She has a gun on Scott. Dolph throws something at her. She is stunned. The bad guy sees someone at the window. They think it's Scott. They shoot, and they shoot the shit out of her. And it's not squibs. It's a bit of CG enhancements. She falls, and they realize they accidentally shot one of their own. Like that was kind of funny. That was an interesting way to kill someone. Where Dolph hits her and then she wanders into her own taste of friendly fire. I didn't mind that bit. But okay, right there we now have 4 bad guys left. 4. And of the 4, Scott Adkins fights a bit, gets a gun, Dolph helps him shoot a guy, and then there's a guy on the ground. Scott shoots the other guy in the head. Now we're down to 2. And Dolph hasn't done much other than little fights with Scott, one guy he hits in the chest, and helping Scott shoot this guy. That's all Dolph has done, and we're over an hour into the movie. And Scott hasn't done a whole lot more than that. And again, that's where the disappointment comes in. Because now we have 2 more left. The building... Like, if it was one of those things where it sets up that Scott has worked in this demolition job, and from the beginning, we have 90 minutes left, and try to do it like real time, that could have been interesting. We have 90 some minutes until this place is blown up. We learn the information as we go along with Scott and Dolph hiding and maybe having conversation to ease their nerves, blah, blah, blah. Get a bit of backstory through that while they're on the move. I think that could have been cool. Like try to do a real time. They have 90 minutes. If they try to escape, they'll get shot. If they stand, they'll get blown up. What will they do? That could have been maybe more exciting. But that wasn't the case. Just 40-some minutes in, and then tells us there's 90 minutes left till the building blows up. Something like that. So they get the money. Scott and Dolph at one point get to the roof. Scott's under fire, tells Dolph to go because he has someone to help. Dolph doesn't want to, but he does anyway. Pretty much he does a tuck and roll and shoots a guy. That's it. Scott Adkins fights the guy. He's losing because he has a hurt arm. He's ready to submit and die at this point, but he fights back. Cool to utilize fighting with one arm damage. So he's using this arm or his legs. That was cool to watch. Knocks the guy down. Jumps off into the back of Dolph's truck, which there's some garbage and stuff there. Go off. Building blows up or crumbles down. Did not the best of effects. Dolph's able to help his daughter. Scott goes on to Alaska. The prisoner that told Dolph is able to get his revenge on the other guy in prison. The end of movie. The music, I don't remember a damn thing about the music in this. The score, the direction. I think this is one of Dolph's lesser efforts compared to The Defender or Command Performance. I think this is one of his lesser efforts. Again, not as bad as Missionary Man, but not as good as his other stuff. So I'm a bit disappointed in Dolph's direction in this. Other than the fight scenes are the few that there are, not too shabby. I wish he would get away from the... It's not as bad, but, the camera doing this. I'm getting sick and tired of that. Get a fucking tripod. Or move the camera in smooth motions. That's, to me, much preferred. I did enjoy many action films that do that, but it is something I'm getting tired of, is that type of thing. And overall, just kind of a meh. Alright, so like, I'm all in that realm. I don't know quite where to put it. It's not bad. It's not great. It's better than some of Dolph's recent work. But I mean, maybe that's not saying much. I'll take this over Retrograde and Dead Trigger and some of the Shark Lake. But again, with those two guys starring in it and Dolph directing it, I do expect a bit more. I do expect a bit better. And this was, I saw it once. It was alright. I would never see it again. I would never pick it up for my collection because it's just not that great or memorable. It's there. It's there. Like I said, didn't hate it, didn't love it. Should have been a lot better. Thankfully, it wasn't much worse. Yeah. Like I said, if you have a streaming service or you see this for cheap and you're big fans of these guys, you could do a lot worse. You could watch it, but I'm just saying you may not remember a whole lot afterwards either. So with that said, thanks for watching. Take care. We'll see you guys later.